Hello everyone, and welcome back to all of you joining us from around the world. We've now got a fantastic session here in Manchester, Fashion Forward, Manchester's industrial past and its sustainable future. There's going to be 50 minutes of discussion, and then we're leaving 10 minutes time for questions, so do again keep those questions coming. I'm going to hand over to Sophie Benson, who's going to chair this, and Sophie is a freelance journalist and author with specific focus on sustainability. Enjoy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yes, as Minnie said, I am a sustainability journalist and author, and this is my book behind me. I'm really pleased to be hosting this conversation this afternoon. I'm going to start by giving just a really brief history of kind of how we got to where we are in terms of fashions Manchester's rather kind of industrial past. As the title suggests, Manchester does have a very storied textile history. It had, astronomical growth in industrial titan back in the 17th century, and that was due to the importation of boldly coloured fabrics from South Asia, and that drove demand for cotton manufacturers. During that period, the city's population more than doubled in size in the 18th century, and that was driven by the demand for textile labour, but also, of course, it was underpinned by the transatlantic slave trade. In 1830, the world's first intercity railway between Liverpool and Manchester opened, and Manchester claimed its throne as, quote-unquote, Cottonopolis, as its capacity for import and export skyrocketed. And I think it's really it's kind of really key to point out that Manchester as a city, I think, really exemplified the atrocities and the struggles and the triumphs of industrialisation, although the triumphs were largely reserved for those who owned the means of production. The regional prosperity was linked to slavery. Disenfranchised workers were brutalised at Peterloo as they protested against poor working conditions and wages. Steam power allowed the machine to replace the hand, the factory replaced the home loom, and a growing middle class took to the suburbs to escape the pollution of the city, while the working class suffered danger and disease. Manchester was described as the shock city of the Industrial Revolution, but by the 60s and 70s, huge political, societal and economic shifts around the globe meant mills were closing across Manchester at a rate of around 1 per week. And by the 80s, Manchester's textile industry was all but over. But just a few decades later, it would be replaced by a fast fashion industry that didn't own any factories, it didn't produce anything itself, rather it profited off the exportation of the exploitative conditions Manchester once knew to countries such as India, Bangladesh and Vietnam. Brands like Boohoo and Pretty Little Thing made many millions, billions in one case, by churning out cheap disposable clothes at lightning speed. And in doing so, they fundamentally changed the fashion consumer's understanding of value and quality. But, thankfully, bubbling up under the surface and the dominance of Manchester's fast fashion brands is a culture of innovation and justice led by a cohort of determined and resourceful groups and individuals. And I'm really thrilled to be joined by 3 such people today. So I'm going to start by handing over to Alison.
Thank you. Hi. Well, I initially started because I wanted to champion those low fashion, good quality independent brands that are in the city that I was familiar with. Out of that, I realised I wanted to play my part in our collective future. So MFM has evolved into a creative activist movement that encourages behavioural change for really just to have a better relationship with clothing. The methods that we use to do that is we reinvent empty spaces in areas where people wouldn't have access to these sorts of brands or that way of shopping. We do annual events where we have sustainable fashion parties, which we harness all of these independent brands and champion them again. We have more recently moved into the SME space where people are being given the time in their working day to consider and think about their relationship with clothing and the impact that that has on the environment. And we have recently, again this year, moved into the green spaces. So we hosted a great fashion show at RHS Gardens, Bridgewater, which was a very theatrical, immersive event. And again, it's about connecting that horticulture and fashion, so we get people into those spaces to consider that, the clothes that they're wearing are, well, everything has initially come from the soil. So I think I'm going to show you a video because it's probably better than me chatting about it, really.
I look good, don't I? Like, proper bloody good. And I feel it too. It's funny that how some fabric scraps can feel like the fabric of you. Like mums with a penchant for leopard print, the baits of polka dots versus stripe, teenage girls sans ribbon curls that opt for pre-ripped tights, neckles stretched from t-shirts put on after faces fully made up, holes in soles of last Christmas socks that have grown to be house favourites, jeans bearing thread, a map of scuffed knees and denim hemlines chewed, from inches never grown, cuffs never sewn, indigo dye rubbed off on white shoes. This is an ode to clothes, loved after death and back to life again, with a needle, thread, some wonder web, especially round the thighs and hems, wonky stitches, fingers pricked, hand-me-downs for our kid and his, an ode to clothes not lightly worn but really truly lived in. Garb grown of green earth, spun, dyed and worked, cut, sewn and adorned on my back. And it might just be my well-being is seeded in this t-shirt from the season before last. Of bygone fads and eras past, what happened to clothes that were built to last? Used to be measured twice, cut once, now it's grab out your camera, greedy hands. Eyes bigger than belly, basket bigger than wardrobe, my closet seems to expand. Droves of unworn clothes bought with discount clothes, money slips through my fingers like sand. Impulse control on zero, overdraft on new shoes, I want it all. And you know what? I think it wants me too. It says this would look perfect on you. And we saw it in your basket a minute ago. Have 10% off on us. Go on, go. Life's too short to live without gorgeousness. Have you seen the news? Am I really that bad to want to buy away the blues? That bad to indulge in ads that prey on my every mood? I don't want to walk a mile in my shoes. I'll get them half off, brand new. See, they've convinced us our status is static, but materialism, well, that lets us gander. Lets us see how the other half live, dress up, play house on greener pastures, but it's them that set the world on fire. Then sell the salve to soothe the burns, they usher in the great flood, then sell brollies to profit off feigned concern, and who am I to save the world? I'm just a mere mortal with a great sense of style. And if I can't take it with me, and it won't get me anywhere meanwhile, oh God, just let me spend. Don't think, just buy. What's the harm in one more time, just once more again? What's the harm in a million more one mores from a million more use? Basket full, bank card abused, material reaped from earth misused to doll you up in garments new. You want the world, and it wants you too, right?
Just to demonstrate the incredible creative community that we've got in Manchester, because most of them were there and I had the honour to work with them.
Talia. Yeah, hi, my name is Dr. Talia Hussein, and I am interested in shopping for clothes. Quite often we talk about changes to production, making better things, making things better, what brands should be doing. We talk about consumer behavior change, what consumers could be doing differently, how we should all be buying better, keeping things longer, repairing. But we don't talk about how shopping will change when we're making all these changes to production and consumption. So I'm interested in that. And I'm also interested in how shopping creates unsustainability in the fashion industry. And we heard from Patrick Grant earlier today about how 30% of clothes that are produced don't even get sold, they go to landfill. I've heard that overproduction can be up to 50%. And I want to quickly explain to you why that is. And I have some slides here, I think hopefully to explain to you something called the news vendor model. You can look this up in any operations management textbook in the library here at Manchester or anywhere else. They teach it to you in business school. They use t-shirts as an example of how to do this thing called the news vendor model. And what it is a mathematical formula that uses probabilistic forecasts to help you calculate the optimum order quantity for perishable products in the face of uncertain demand. So there's a bunch of problems with that, like perishable products, but there's also accounting incentives built into this model and the way that it's used that drives overproduction and over-ordering in the fashion industry. So if we have this t-shirt, it's going to cost £10 to make. You're going to sell it for £30. You get a profit of £20. You don't actually know how many t-shirts you're going to sell. You think it's going to be somewhere between 6 and 10, but you don't know. If you do not order those extra 4 t-shirts, that lost sales, those lost profits of £80 are accounted for in the same way as your actual costs in this model. And so there's a massive incentive to over-order, because when you start adding in discounting, the risks of over-ordering just disappear. So if you only sell 6 t-shirts and you start discounting them, 1/3 off, 2/3 off, even if you send 10% of your production to landfill, you're still making a profit of £120. And so the incentive, if you can sell 1 more at just 1/3 off, you're £10 ahead. So the incentive to order more is enormous, and the risk to ordering more is almost negligible. So this is one of the ways that retailers, one of the practices they use that's driving unsustainability in this industry that we don't talk about, and we should.
And we will. Thank you. And on to Susan.
Thank you. Okay. So, I'm Susan Postlethwaite. I'm Professor of Fashion Technologies here at Manchester Met, and I'm the Director of the Robotics Living Lab. So we got nearly £4 million, actually, so this figure is slightly under, from the Arts and Humanities Research Council to set up the Robotics Living Lab here. And our purpose is to develop Manchester as a site of industrial production, and just think about a reshoring scenario, develop lots of ideas around robotics and collaborative robotics. The image in the background of this picture is actually the most important part. So what we've got here is a woman wearing an exoskeleton. She's working on a car body part, and all her tooling is suspended from the ceiling. And this was the image that really got me interested in new ways of manufacturing and thinking about agile tooling and robotics in the UK. So this is roughly what the lab looks like now. It's a bit fuller, so you can see a robot arm coming in from the right-hand side of the picture. We've got lots of mobile robots, we've got collaborative robots, we've got lots of bits of tooling and kit. So the £4 million was really for infrastructure. So we built the lab space, newly fitted out, with lots of tools and equipment. So you can see the kinds of equipment we were imagining here in this slide as collaborative robotics. And more collaborative robots, so bi-arm robots and cell spaces. And this is the work in progress space. So currently we can't allow students and untrained staff into the lab space. So we've developed a work in progress space, and we worked with Bennett's architects, Bennett's associates, to develop this space. So it has a triple function. So it works as an exhibition space, it works as our offices, and it also works as a lecture format. And we've just literally taken ownership of both the spaces as of yesterday, which is really exciting. So that's me.
Haven't we timed this perfectly? Thank you. I'm back in control. Okay. So, so as you heard, I'm joined by a very esteemed panel who have really varied experience and viewpoints to share with us. Alison, I wanted to start with you. Manchester, unfortunately, has built a reputation as the UK's fast fashion capital. But there is a definitive pushback happening from creatives, from organisers, from innovators across the city. How does Manchester fashion movement fit into that? And what is it about the energy at the moment among the creative community that is feeding into the positive progress that we're seeing?
And when I thought about starting all of this, I was sat in the car looking at a massive, massive billboard for a fast fashion brand, and I was thinking, God, I know all these people in this city, in small studios all around the city doing incredible work, and like, when are we going to be shouting about them? So that was really the initial sort of thing in my tummy where I was like, I want to do something, I want to play my part, even though I don't come from a fashion background or anything. And then when I just sort of went into communities asking them, like, what's your thoughts on, like, you know, slow fashion? And pretty much everyone we spoke to, no matter what the demographic or disposable income or whatever, everyone pretty much said the same thing. So we were like looking at the challenges there, which were, you know, essentially, I don't have the time to research all this. I don't know where to begin. The cost, the elitism, a little bit. So they were the kind of things we wanted to address and just get to people and get to all those different demographics and all those different communities with and engage them in a way that they could respond well to, they would respond well to, and it makes them tick, and you know, so we could get them involved in the conversation, and then obviously in turn they would take some positive action. And it was really always around people having a better relationship with their clothing. So we set about like looking at things that we could do, and then obviously all the methods that I mentioned before. We do events and fashion shows and various different things. But I have to say, like when I went to speak to different people initially to start it off, everyone wanted to get on board. So I realised there was a huge appetite for events like this, being part of a community that was better and wanted to be better, and loved design and loved fashion, you know, loved clothing and the art of it, but not necessarily wanting to be part of the sort of fast fashion element. So I couldn't ever have done any of this without all of those incredible creatives that you've seen. It just in that one video, spoken word, music producers, models, stylists, hair, makeup, art direction, like all of that, and it's kind of come full circle too, because we do a lot of work with MFI. We get a lot of amazing interns from the university, and they use our methods as case studies. So we're now, you know, contributing to the future and policy and, you know, all the research and stuff. So I absolutely, Manchester, when they say that everybody wants to help everybody out, that's definitely the way I feel about it, because obviously I'm an adopted Manc. I'm not from here originally, but I very much feel like a Manc now.
Yeah, so the impacts of that community are really far-reaching.
Yeah.
And Susan, your work and research also has a local context, but with a different kind of spin on it, so touching on factors like reshoring and the need for UK-based support for design innovation. I'd love it if you could just explain a little bit about the reach of your work and also what is necessitating this kind of change that you're spearheading.
So, a bit loud, sorry. So the thrust of the research is really around working with micro and SME businesses to make them more productive and better makers in a UK context. So over lockdown, we did some research, and we were able to access a lot of small and medium-sized businesses just because the lockdown situation meant that people weren't necessarily working. And so we were able to get together a lot of people and get a lot of feedback. So we published a report, which, and I'm going to check my notes here. So reshoring garment manufacturing to the UK with automation. So we published that in 2020. And we piggybacked on what was called the Alliance Report, which actually came out of Manchester, was based in Manchester, and looked at textile and fashion producers in this region. And one of the things that the Alliance report recommended, so multiple things, a reshoring agenda, an upskilling agenda, reinvigorating manufacturing, potentially the use of automation and robotics, and also setting up labs that were attached to universities so that we could do more experimental work. And that, I'm really pleased to say, is exactly what we're hoping to do with the lab space. So we're working in quite a speculative way. We're going to give ourselves quite a lot of time to develop tooling and to develop robotic capabilities so that we can then showcase these tools to other people and micro and SME businesses so that we can engage with them.
Absolutely fantastic. And, you know, hopefully in the audience we have lots of people from different countries, and hopefully, you know, we can expand the reach of what you're doing and take that sort of reshoring and local approach and let it sort of grow in its own microcosms across the globe. And Alison, you know, today there has been a lot of talk about how fantastic Manchester is, and in lots of ways it is. However, we do know there are barriers to the growth of kind of positive change. In your experience, what are those barriers, and how could the leadership in Manchester help to catalyse the sustainable progress that you're trying to build?
I'd say, like, landlords, when we reinvent empty spaces, like, they always get on board with it to begin with because it feels like a tick box thing or something, I don't know. But then eventually it's like they pile all these fees on and rents and different things. Well, it's you know, impossible for when you're housing a load of tiny, small independent brands, like, to be paying out huge rents and stuff. So something around, like, they're lying empty anyway, and we've demonstrated when we went into a shopping centre at Media City that we brought a whole raft of different people in there that would never go into that shopping centre, because we were hosting art exhibitions, you know, music, all independent brands. We had makers, had studios in there making things so people could come in and watch people making garments. So, you know, we've demonstrated that there's a social impact of us reinventing these empty spaces. You know, they're hubs for a lot of people as well, like community hubs for a lot of people. But yeah, so something around there being some leeway with the rents and stuff. Maybe like for the makers that we would house and harness, a lot of them would say things like, you know, incentives for them to be having a brand in the city and making in the city, some financial incentives, and also for them to scale up when they need to make orders or get material, like the ends of material or whatever it is. They can't, but you know, those orders when they do in slow production and made to order, then it's expensive. So if, you know, there was that collaboration where all of the brands could maybe, I don't know, all put in their orders together and it was just one fee and they split it or something. Any of those sorts of financial incentives would be key, I think. Smaller brands.
So we just need to call Andy Burnham back in and we can have that chat with him, absolutely. And Tali, your research focuses on retail as well and kind of its role in connecting production to consumption. And there were some really interesting examples of that you showed us earlier. But could you talk us through sort of more of your research into retail and any developments that have happened as the active retail space that we have had and known has disappeared over the last few years?
It's a really interesting question because we've all seen like the, you know, Topshop's gone and like House of Fraser is like changed dramatically. And all of our high streets are changing as well, and we're losing this independent retail. But actually, the active retail space, I think, is expanding because it's all around us now, all the time. And I bet there's someone in the audience online who's online shopping right now, right? So we can shop constantly, everywhere, all the time. I have shopped from the bath. I bought a book. So with that massive shift away from these physical retail spaces into online spaces, what we are seeing from a sustainability perspective is actually an acceleration of unsustainable consumption. And it's partially because we're still buying stuff, because people are buying stuff from these hyper fast fashion retailers like Shein and its competitors, but also because the business models of these online retailers have a ton of problems with them, right? Like, if you are ordering from an online retailer, you can't know if this thing's going to fit you until it arrives, and it doesn't fit you and you send it back. A lot of the time that stuff is not going back into inventory. It might get liquidated or, you know, something else. They're not going to try to find another customer for it. But also, with all of this inventory, like, people are buying multiple sizes and then sending it back. So you actually have to start operating a larger inventory in order to make sure that you're not missing out on these potential sales like I discussed earlier. So these online models are hugely problematic in terms of the amount of stuff that's being produced that's not being matched to a customer, that, like, no one actually wants, and you know, and is going into, like, liquidation or landfill, or just being you know, sold at a deep discount, which is called onward disposal to the customer, right? So there's all kinds of problems there, and we all know that a lot of these fast fashion brands, these very cheap brands, are the prices are enabled by labor abuse, and these online retailers are bringing that labor abuse home, and they're visiting it upon retail workers, because we can't see them anymore. They're not on the high street. They're now in these massive warehouses. And it's well documented that when, like, Amazon and these other large retail warehouses move into an area, you see warehouse work become less well paid, it becomes more dangerous, and it becomes deadly. And then we also have the issue of these last mile delivery workers who are being denied access to, like, basic amenities like toilets while they're working. So we're seeing whole new groups of people brought into abusive labor practices with the rise of online shopping.
I think onward disposal to the customer is something we should all remember every time we see a sale sign, absolutely. Is there a way in which we can use retail to catalyse more sustainable brands from both brands and customers? Do you have any examples of that? What have you kind of seen in your research?
Something we've been talking about all day, really, is, like, buying things to last, buying things that we like. I spent quite a bit of time talking to customers who are trying to be more sustainable in their shopping and wardrobe practices. And the thing that we all know, that's, like, you know, that I didn't discover it, we all know this, is that when you find something that you like, that suits you, that fits you really well, you just keep that thing going and going and going, and you repair it, and you love it, and you feel good about it. And that's not actually something that the fashion industry delivers, right? It makes all these clothes for us as ready-made garments. They're not meant to fit us, right? They're just meant to be sold and for us to buy them, but not necessarily to fit us and make us feel good. But if we can get those clothes that fit us, that are what we want, that express our identities, then those are the kinds of garments that we are going to want to keep longer, repair, and actually potentially even pay more for, right? So that we can start, you know, getting these price points up, using better quality fabrics, using, you know, paying garment workers more. And so I think what I'm interested in is how can we bring those kind of semi-customization services into our retail environment so we can actually get clothes that are for us and that fit us and that we love to wear and repair again and again.
And do you have your example
I do.
with us? We have a show and tell.
I do
Very
have some show and
excited.
tell. When we spoke about this before, Sophie asked me if I had a case study. And this is a case study of 1.5 billion consumers who buy their clothes semi-customized. This is a dress I bought in India. This is how you buy clothes traditionally in India. You buy them partially made. So this is a silver kameez that you can see the sleeves. Can you hold that for me, Susan? You can see the sleeves here off to the side, and this length would be turned into the trousers. You take it to a tailor to get made up. You have a lot of options about how it's finished, what kind of style of trousers. Do you want them tight around the ankles or palazzo style? And you have a lot of different options. One of my cousins, when she was having a dress made up in India, she had the tailor put extremely large seam allowances inside so she could just have it let out and keep that dress going for as long as she wanted to. So, when we're making decisions about how to keep these clothes going as customers, we can make those better choices if we have these kinds of options in front of us. And this is the kind of example of how we don't have to be buying clothes the way that we're accustomed to. There are other retail models out there. There's other options if we just recognize that buying our clothes ready-made isn't necessarily the only way to do it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a good example of the fact that sometimes the answer is actually already out there, and it's not always about, trying to innovate the next thing. Having said that, there is room for both. There is room for kind of leaning on the traditional and then building what's next. And for me, when I think about futuristic, I don't think it gets more futuristic than robots. And we did see some images earlier of the cobots, actually, as they're called, aren't they, in your slides. And I would just love to know more about them, what their role is, and how, in your opinion, they can be instrumental in creating a more balanced or a more positive approach to production in fashion.
So, collaborative robots, as the name suggests, they're designed to work with humans, alongside humans. So you can imagine that the kinds of tools that we're potentially developing with needles on the end and knives and blades and all the rest of it are not necessarily particularly compatible with robot technologies or collaborative robot technologies. But what you can do is you can train a robot to follow a cut path, for instance. And so we've developed a collaborative robot which has a cutting tool end effector on the end. So the end effector is the business part of the tooling, the robot arm. And we showcased that recently at the Manufacturing Technology Centre. So that's in Coventry. We were funded by CIFIN, so the Circular Fashion Innovation Network, and UK Fashion and Textiles. And we did a whole workshop day around introducing micro and SME fashion designer manufacturer businesses to collaborative robotics. So we piggybacked on the sustainability conference that's held at the MTC every year. And we showcased our robot and the end effector technology. We want to design a whole suite of collaborative robots, end effector tools. So the cutting tool is the first tool. We're applying currently to work with UCL Medical Robotics to develop a suturing tool, which could also be used as a stitch tool. Uses a tiny circular needle, which is really exciting. So we're really hoping that we get that funding. And then we want to design pressing tools, we want to design sonic welding tools, et cetera, et cetera. So a whole kind of suite of tools that can help support fashion manufacturing in the UK.
That's so fascinating. I mean, it sounds, I love the thought of all these kind of sort of semi-incredibly dangerous robots, but doing
so
in a
we've
safe
got
way.
so many checks and balances in place, you know, and the health and safety protocols are just endless.
I can imagine. And you just mentioned circularity and a circularity funding, and circularity is a huge part of a sustainable fashion future. However, when we think about circularity, we often think about kind of the downstream mess. What do we do with clothing that's already been discarded? But if we are to look at today's dominant fashion model and the supply chain that comes with it, what changes need to happen upstream to accelerate those circularity efforts? What can we change before we get to the point of waste?
So are you asking me?
Everyone, this is open to everyone.
Okay, so there is quite a bit of work that's happening actually within Manchester Met that's being led by the University of Leeds. So it's NERIC funded, and it's a network plus, and it's called Back to Baselines. And what we're doing is we're investigating what circularity actually means in a UK context. So basically it's an enormous literature review that we're doing, and we're trying to find out what baselines you can actually trust in a UK context. So there are so many sustainability remits and circularity proposals and et cetera, et cetera. How can you trust any of it? What can you trust? So what's in the public domain? What methodologies are being used? What data is being collected? So this report, so we're halfway through the research at the moment. The report will come out sometime at the middle of next year. And I think it's going to be a really, really valuable piece of work in order to help support us in thinking about circularity within a UK context.
Anyone else want to jump in on the circularity question?
Yeah, I do. I think we need to be making less stuff that doesn't have an end user, right? That doesn't have a customer. A lot of the stuff that's being made right now is like it's on its way to landfill until a customer comes along and buys it. And we shouldn't be making stuff for landfill. So I think we should be looking at how we can have models where instead of making clothes and then trying to sell them, we are selling clothes and then trying to make them. So moving towards pulled production, moving towards semi-customization processes that increase the pool of customers that a garment can be matched to. It's good for businesses, it's good for customers. And you know, a lot of the conversation that's happening in circularity around business models right now is about resale and rental. And we don't see huge uptake of those models in the market, and we are not going to. And the reason is because the margins on those transactions are lower than they are on sales. And there is not a massive business opportunity in these lower margins. So if businesses are looking for higher margins, you need to be looking for how you can create value for customers. And that means creating clothes that fit on their bodies and that make them feel good about wearing them.
Which seems incredibly simple and perhaps how we all want to feel about everything. And I really like what you say about matching clothes to the consumer, because I think certainly for me, if I find something secondhand, I almost feel like it was there sort of waiting for me to be matched to it, like that matchmaking thing. So I think that's a really sort of a quite sweet and personal way of looking at it. I think we need to feel that personal relationship with our clothes more, as well as sort of fixing the much broader industrial issues as well.
We definitely need to find the joy, don't we? Like Martin was saying before about joy. We need to find the joy in immersive shopping experiences, not online, and mending and all these great ways, and your wardrobe, loving your wardrobe and all those things, so that the clothes you're wearing are saying the right thing about you to the world. So yeah, definitely finding the joy.
Fantastic. And before we move on to the questions online, just a final question to kind of bring it back to the local context of this conversation. I think, so British fashion is a dichotomy because the manufacturing is really fractured and globalised, and yet the creative centre is still very much London. It's really centralised. So for everyone outside the capital, it can feel quite inaccessible. But as a fashion outpost that kind of has the freedom of not being set in stone as the centralised fashion industry. How can Manchester act as a blueprint for a more equitable and responsible fashion future? And again, that's to anyone who wants to jump in.
Well, I liked what Alison was saying about, creating forums for these micro brands and designers, and creating spaces where, like actual markets, market sites, marketplaces, where customers can come and see things happening and have some kind of relationship with the people who are making their clothes. And I think that's something that's really missing from our fashion culture right now, when we're dealing with these like giant multinational brands who, as we've discussed earlier in the day, are extractive, right? A lot of local authorities and cities rely on retail projects as part of their urban regeneration plans. I'm based in London, and I think of Coal Drops Yard, and I think of Battersea Power Station, and they're just absolutely soulless, full of multinational brands. They could be literally anywhere. Coal Drops Yard is right next to Central St. Martin's. Why is it not full of CSM graduates making cool, wild, weird, wonderful things for us to go and see and buy? And I think we're really missing these exciting fashion marketplaces.
I think we're good at that in Manchester. Yeah, we've got a good network of markets and events and different things that are championing all these brands. So I definitely think that we are a good blueprint for everybody else, for the fact that we're all working well together and championing, and we want to be the champions, I think, and be ahead of the game in Manchester with the whole green movement and fashion. So, and I'm glad I'm part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Living here, I do feel that kind of, that everyone championing each other and that sense of community. And we do have some really great questions from our online viewers, so thank you very much. All these questions are to the whole panel, so please feel free to jump in. First question, what advice would you give to designers working in different scales of fashion businesses about how they can get buy-in from leadership and the rest of the marketing and comms colleagues to be more sustainable? Tricky one.
Complicated.
Read it again.
So how do you, people who are working in fashion businesses at different scales, how do you get the kind of go ahead, the buy-in from the leadership, from the other members of your team to want to push the sustainability side of things, so it's not just left to you to kind of be the single champion within the brand or the team?
It's a necessity. It's an absolute necessity that people start thinking about sustainability as core to their business. It's quite difficult to achieve.
Yes.
But surely everybody has to start thinking in that way around sustainability.
And finding ways of engaging, getting everybody on board with it, not just a small team of people in your business.
Yeah.
You've got to get the buy-in from everybody, no matter what their role is in the business, I would say. So finding creative ways to do that. Like at the minute, we're going into businesses and they are on board with it, the directors, and they want their staff to have their well-being days around bringing in their old jackets and making things, and we're hosting these types of things, and then they've got us making these denim buns that go off to all their clients, and they get their clients to put their old jeans in, and then they come back and we get these totes made with their branding on, and so gradually they're making headway with engaging everybody, their customers, their clients, suppliers, and their staff. So I love working with that company because they're very on board with it. They're quite progressive, and they like, it's not just a tick box for them.
And it's showing the creativity in it, not just the sort of doom and gloom of, if we don't do this, this is an emergency.
And it is with further reach of engaging and getting everybody on board with their ESG goals, because they know in the next couple of years they've got to demonstrate all of this. So they're starting now, which is great, and engaging their whole workforce.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any more takes on that? Right, I'll move on to the next one. Again, this is, you've given us really quite hard and challenging questions in the audience. How can the fast fashion giants be incentivized to move towards more sustainable business models? How do we turn the ship?
stop buying from them, frankly.
Yeah.
Stop
Yeah,
buying, stop giving them your money.
Stop supporting them.
Yeah.
Feeding the monster. Stop feeding the monster.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a controversial position, but it is a position that I'm willing to take.
Just another example, though, because I don't think it should always be down to us as customers to to be trying to effect change. And I know that a while ago, India simply banned Shein's app. Shein got around it, which is a whole other story. But I actually think this whole idea that it should be down to us as customers
I would agree.
to buy our way out of these problems is like, that's just the same thinking that got us into this problem in the first place. And, you know, Alison talked earlier about, you know, some subsidies for, you know, encouraging small brands who are doing things differently. And we see that kind of policy making coming in at an EU level where their policy papers are arguing in favor of subsidies for more sustainable business models. And I think that bringing in these kinds of tiered structures for, you know, carrots and sticks financially is to make it unprofitable for these businesses to operate the way they are. I think that's what has to happen.
Yeah, and I think there's a balance to be had. Patrick said earlier, what was the quote? That the brands won't exist if we don't buy what they've trained us to want.
Yeah.
Yeah, and absolutely, you know, I think sometimes there is an either-or kind of argument, but actually if we put them both together and we can kind of crush them from both sides, I think, yeah.
There is a lot of unpicking, isn't there? Because we, Patrick was saying that we've been trained and did this way of shopping, so there's a fair bit of unpicking that we have to do in the way that we...
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we all become experts in like the shopping system because we've been doing it all our lives since we were infants, right? And, you know, quite often when I talk to people about like these semi-customized kind of garments, it blows their minds because they've never considered that you could buy clothes any other way than just bespoke or ready-made. And these paradigms that we exist in are not unchangeable if we have the wit and the imagination to start changing them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And final question, this is a good one. I think in some way there's sort of makers among all of us. We've been seeing increased interest in crafting, knitting, and people wanting to make their own. As designers, how can we move the industry to promote crafting practices?
Yeah, it's definitely a lost skill, isn't it? Like, because we go into a lot of schools, and I can't believe how many, you know, there's not that much of an offering in the curriculum for young people to. So we were doing it like as an extracurricular thing. But it was, you know, funny because they'd say, oh, I want to work in fashion. And they'd say, what do you want to do? I don't know, I just want to work in fashion. And then, oh, there's loads of jobs, you know. Well, it was because even that wasn't even sort of described to them. And but yeah, anyway, back to crafting. Yes, definitely, it's a lost skill. And my mum made me clothes my whole life. So I've sort of grown up with that sort of idea of making your own things and mending and stuff. I can't do it as well as my mum, though. She's mortified about that. But yeah, definitely, it's really important to bring back that lost life skill, I think. And it's the joy, again, that you find and when you do mend something or you make something, like there's so much joy in that, isn't there? And also that you're contributing as well. I feel like that's for your own well-being, that feeling that you're contributing positively to not buying from a fashion brand or whatever, that you're buying something old and repurposing it or whatever it is.
I think this issue of, you know, taking pleasure in things, enjoying things is really important because a lot of people do take pleasure and joy in making their own clothes. And yet at the same time, we've denigrated garment workers as being unskilled. And anyone who's ever tried to make something knows that's not true. So I think we can start rethinking how we talk about making clothes and also the people who make our clothes.
Yeah.
And make it
so
like
the whole
colour.
idea of touching cloth is really, really important. And that's where the cobots actually come in, because the human element of that, of touching and handling, and then sharing that with a robot or a collaborative robotic end effector tool, really important.
It's fascinating. Yeah, but there is so much discussion, isn't there, around the fact that you need that human tactility to be able to, you know, handle different weights of fabrics, etc. So, yeah, the human touch is so important, and the language as well, and how we talk about it and value it, I think, is incredibly important as well. Thank you so much for the questions online. It's been a fantastic conversation. Please, please join me in thanking the three panelists for your conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hope you really enjoyed that. Thank you so much to the guys here. Now we're going to pause for a second, and we will see you back very soon for the next session, where we're going to be moving to buildings and radical retrofitting.